The 2020 election controversy continues, especially on social media, with big tech companies fighting misinformation. Is social media censorship here to stay? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. You should be using a VPN like Surfshark to protect yourself whenever you go online. So, earlier this week, one event reaffirmed the stark choice between the two men that will determine the future of America. I'm talking, of course, about Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. I'm honestly not sure which dystopian future for America is scarier. The one offered by vat-grown Matrix Baby or Burning Man Mad Max? Either way, it looks grim. Anyway, the CEOs of the two most powerful social media companies in the world were testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee about how their platforms have handled the presidential election. The answer is great, according to themselves.
We've built sophisticated systems to protect against election interference that combine artificial intelligence, significant human review, and partnerships with the intelligence community, law enforcement, and other tech platforms. We've taken down more than 100 networks of bad actors who are trying to coordinate and interfere globally. We established a network of independent fact-checkers that covers more than 60 languages.
More than a year ago, the public asked us to offer additional context to help make potentially misleading information more apparent. We did exactly that, applying labels to over 300,000 tweets from October 27th to November 11th, which represented about 2.2% of all U.S. election-related tweets.
Now that sounds good, but there's been a lot of controversy over many of the things both companies have done, like with Facebook's independent fact-checkers. Facebook employs 10 different fact-checking organizations. For example, they work with an organization called Climate Feedback to fact-check claims on climate change. The way it works is that these independent fact-checkers are allowed to make their own ratings on whether facts are true, false, partly false, etc. And sharing what's been labeled false information on Facebook now has consequences. Pages and websites that repeatedly share false information will see their distribution reduced and their ability to advertise removed. The problem is, no one is happy with this system. Although the fact-checkers are allowed to make their own ratings, Facebook has the final say and may adjust those ratings. Facebook also determines what information gets fact-checked. For example, they largely don't fact-check statements made by politicians or public figures. They classify those as opinions. And Facebook determines which pages qualify as repeat offenders when it comes to spreading false information. That has led many liberals to accuse Facebook of relaxing their misinformation rules in favor of conservatives. On the other side, conservatives have been claiming for years that Facebook and other social media companies are biased against them. But everyone knows there's no anti-conservative bias on social media. According to Mashable, Facebook and Twitter don't censor conservatives. They even hire some of them. And while Trump supporters have accused Facebook fact-checkers of censoring them, the fact-checkers have rated that claim as totally false. Which leads to the ultimate question: who fact-checks the fact-checkers? Anyway, it doesn't matter whether social media platforms are biased against conservatives, because the right wing has a massive advantage on Facebook, according to Politico. That's because their content is more engaging. I think it's obvious that to be completely fair and neutral, social media needs to stop prioritizing engaging content. In fact, to be completely fair, they need to boost non-engaging content, which is why I look forward to the massive success of my new Facebook page, Watching Paint Dry with Chris Chappell. Be sure to leave a like. Meanwhile, as CEO Jack Dorsey said, Twitter has started labeling election-related misinformation, like this link under a tweet from the Republican Party's national spokesperson, which says this claim about election fraud is disputed. Although if you click on the link, it doesn't actually dispute the specific claim, which is that more than 15,000 votes were cast in Nevada by people who also voted in another state, 1,000 from people who don't meet Nevada's residency requirements, and 500 from people who were dead. No, instead of fact-checking those claims, it brings you to a general page about how experts say that voter fraud is rare in the U.S. As you can imagine, this system has also led to controversy, which has been expressed through memes, including one that points out the pitfalls of relying on expert consensus. So a lot of people are unhappy with Twitter and Facebook right now, including the senators who held the 4-hour hearing with the CEOs earlier this week. Both Republicans and Democrats agree that they don't like what social media companies are doing, but they disagree on what these companies are doing wrong. I'll explain how after the break. Welcome back. Republicans and Democrats are both upset with social media companies, but for different reasons. Republicans continue to accuse the social media companies of anti-conservative bias, and some also accuse the companies of coordinating their censorship efforts.
What particularly intrigued me is that the platform reflects censorship input from Google and Twitter as well. So Facebook, as I understand it, Facebook censorship teams communicate with their counterparts at Twitter and Google and then enter those companies' suggestions for censorship onto the task platform so that Facebook can then follow up with them and effectively coordinate their censorship efforts.
Zuckerberg's response was that the companies do share information, but do not coordinate their content moderation with each other. Meanwhile, Democrats argued that the problem was that these social media companies were not censoring enough.
On November 7, President Trump tweeted this: "I won this election by a lot." End quote. That's obviously not true. President Trump lost the election. The warning label that Twitter has applied to the tweet says, and I quote, "Official sources may not have called the race when this was tweeted," end quote. Now, here's the question. Does that label do enough to prevent the tweet's harms when the tweet is still visible and is not accurate?
Look, CEOs of multi-billion-dollar tech companies probably don't get grilled and reprimanded too often, but being asked pointed questions by senators is hardly an existential threat to their businesses. What could be a threat to their businesses, though, is a change to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Currently, Section 230 shields social media platforms from liability from what people say on their platforms. Section 230 basically allows companies to say, hey, we just give people a place to say stuff, so don't sue us for what they say. And both Democrats and Republicans say it needs to change.
And we got to find a way to make sure that when Twitter and Facebook make a decision about what's reliable and what's not, what to keep up and what to take down, that there's transparency in the system. And I think Section 230 has to be changed because we can't get there from here without change.
In fact, it's been called the last remaining bipartisan issue. In the Senate hearing, both Zuckerberg and Dorsey said they were in favor of Section 230 reform, which might sound counterintuitive, but this reform could actually help big tech. I'll show you how after the break. Welcome back. You might think Facebook and Twitter would want to get rid of excessive government regulation, but it turns out it's just the opposite. Facebook and Twitter CEOs both warned against getting rid of Section 230, the law that shields tech giants. What they actually want is Section 230 reform with more regulation. And depending on how that's done, it could actually strengthen the biggest tech companies because they already have the manpower to regulate and control the content on their platforms. Whereas smaller tech startups wouldn't have the resources to compete anymore if they have to comply with those regulations. It would just cement the power of Facebook and Twitter. So instead, some say Congress should pass comprehensive privacy legislation letting users control how their data is collected, used, and shared, and use antitrust law to keep big tech companies from buying up their smaller competitors. Speaking of competitors, there have been a handful of social media companies that have gotten more attention lately. These companies have positioned themselves as the free speech alternatives to Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Companies like Parler, MeWe, and Rumble. Although they're much smaller, these companies have seen prominent conservatives moving to their platforms. In a stark contrast to Twitter and Facebook, Parler, a Twitter alternative, pledged to not filter election-related information. And it's not just their content moderation policies that are different from the social media giants. Parler doesn't use content recommendation algorithms, collects almost no data about its users, and for privacy reasons, hasn't provided the tools to let users easily cross-post from other platforms. So if Parler doesn't use algorithms to figure out what their users want to see, what do their users see? Parler simply shows users all the posts from everyone they follow in reverse chronological order. What? That's it? They just show you what you told them you want to see? That's so Twitter in 2016. The good old days. It remains to be seen whether these social media alternatives will actually thrive and make a dent in the user base of big tech companies. Experts say it won't last. But having them there is still good, right? After all, competition between companies is good for innovation, and giving people a choice is good for users, right? Well, not so fast there, because there's some crazy stuff out there on Parler and other platforms, according to expert Bill Gates. Although I guess for some people, Bill Gates saying that Parler's content is crazy is practically an endorsement. A recent Washington Post editorial also called these social media sites fringe counterparts with a hands-off approach to all manner of phony narratives and conspiratorial content, and brought up the danger that the Parlers of the world will create the QAnons of tomorrow. A Newsweek article, again quoting very smart and rich person Bill Gates, makes Parler sound like an app that only Holocaust deniers would use. And do you really want to be on the same social media site as Holocaust deniers? Or conservatives? What if someone thinks you're a Holocaust denier? Or a conservative? But despite that, Parler's CEO says they won't censor people with crazy opinions.
I wonder if you're going to keep your posture going forward. As your company gets big and much more valuable, it's already happening, people are going to attack you as being a home for extremism, and some crazy person said something crazy on your site. There's going to be a whole lot more of that, and you're going to come under enormous pressure to censor those voices. What's your response going to be?
Well, when you go out in public, people say crazy things all the time. Everybody has opinions, and some of them, might not be the norm, right? But it's not against the law to have those opinions. It's not against the law to express yourself, And if you like one political candidate or another, or you believe or don't believe in climate change or whatever it might be, you shouldn't be taken offline because of it.
I mean, sure, it's not illegal to say crazy things, but people might not want to stand around in a public square that's just full of people saying crazy things. So we'll have to see whether that business model works out for Parler. Meanwhile, we still have these two social media futures to look forward to: Matrix Baby or Burning Man Mad Max. I still can't decide. Which would you choose? And speaking of big tech, this episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Every time you go on the internet, whether it's on your computer or mobile phone, everything you do is being tracked and logged by your internet service provider and by big companies like Facebook that track the websites you visit and what you search for. If you're tired of big tech and the government knowing everything about you, you really ought to use a VPN, like Surfshark, to protect your identity. When you use Surfshark's Clean Web Mode, you'll be protected from trackers plus a lot of ads and malware. With one account, you can connect as many devices as you want. Try it out with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And Surfshark has a special discount for America Uncovered fans. Go to surfshark.com/uncovered and use the code UNCOVERED to get our special Black Friday deal that includes 84% off a 2-year plan and 4 extra months for free. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.